Welcome to B2B Marketing Methods. I'm your host, Terri Hoffman, and I'm the CEO of Marketing Refresh. Let's face it, embracing digital marketing is daunting. This podcast was created to make it more approachable. Join me as we talk to CEOs, sales leaders, and revenue growth experts who will share lessons learned and tips from their own journeys. Hello and welcome to another episode of B2B Marketing Methods. Today I've got a special guest with us. Her name is Kerry Curran, and Kerry is the founder of a business that's called Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors. She is a business growth strategist and more specifically someone who focuses on go-to-market strategies. She's got expertise on both the sales and marketing side of the equation, which is pretty unique and rare to find in one person. Really excited to have Kerry on as a guest. We're going to be talking about kind of a few highlights in our conversation today. We'll be covering marketing-led growth, how that leads into sales, how that leads into demand generation for your brand. We're also going to be talking about improving your sales cycle. How can you shorten your sales cycle? And then really importantly, how can you improve your close rates? So these are all things when I'm out in the market, talking to prospects, talking to our current clients, very huge hot button issues. I think we're going to learn a lot today together. So thank you, Kerry, for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Great. Thanks, Terri. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So let's start with the basics. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background and explain how it kind of led you to starting your business?
So I've been in the marketing and agency media buying space for over 20 years now. Started brand side and then spent the majority of my career on the agency side. And early on, I moved from account services into strategy roles, which were always my favorite. How do we solve business challenges for brands by using the solutions in our arsenal or portfolio and building out those custom scope of work to drive business growth? So I would spend a lot of time after that role on the business development side of the agency, working with clients, building out, again, what should their go-to-market strategy be? How should they be using media channels and their brand differentiation? And then that role soon expanded to include the marketing of the agency as well, as most agencies are the cobbler's kids. It was building out a marketing and sales infrastructure where we really were building that demand and awareness of the agencies that we were working for, all the way through leading a new business development team to win those accounts, and then working with account services to continue to make sure they were growing. So I've done that throughout a number of different agencies. The majority of my time was with Group M. And most recently, I had the title of Chief Growth Officer, which truly is the CMO plus the Chief Revenue Officer. So I'm really your Chief Revenue Officer that understands marketing and your CMO that understands sales. And so that was when I decided to go out on my own so I could work across more brands and work getting back into client-facing work. That's kind of the approach or the hats that I bring into my client engagements.
Lots of hats.
Lots of hats.
But lots of hats that are starting to look a lot like each other these days. It's an opportunity to evolve how this whole puzzle gets put together. One thing that you said that I think is a really important distinction is using marketing as a growth tool, like as part of the way that you're solving for revenue growth. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, what's your mindset around that?
Yeah. So especially today, over the past couple of years, budgets have gotten tighter and resources have gotten more sparse. I've been talking to a lot of brands that were, especially B2B brands, that say, we just hired a bunch of salespeople. We're not looking to invest in long-term marketing. We don't want to spend money on branding or things that you can't directly attribute to a specific lead that came in. And while there's a lot that marketing can do to drive that short-term goal and growth, the real opportunity there is the more you are out in the marketplace, building your brand awareness and demand, educating your target audience of the unique attributes that you bring to them, how you're going to help them solve their business growth challenges faster, better, the easier it's going to be for your sales team. So the last thing you really want is that your junior business development or sales development rep who's
Mhm.
not as much on the phone, but sending out emails, you don't want that to be the first interaction with your brand. And so
Yeah.
that's really where those investment strategies can improve that sales experience when your prospect is ready to start moving through your pipeline.
Yeah. I mean, there are just so many statistics out there that support what you just said. I just think it's very natural for brands to hire another salesperson, right? When they're
Yeah.
interested
Yeah.
in growing revenue. And I
Mhm.
don't really think that as marketers, we should say that's the wrong move. That
Right.
could be the right move. It's just that there might be other pieces of the puzzle that are missing that would actually
Mhm.
make that new hire in the sales role more efficient and more effective. Yeah.
Exactly. I do think, to your point, like adding another salesperson at the expense of investing in more of that audience awareness and engagement aspect isn't necessarily the recommendation I would make. But to your point, you do need those team members that are there and able to kind of take the hand raisers or connect with your target audience and bring them into your funnel. I think the key point there as well is really training them and helping them, making sure that any email they're sending out is really aligned with the brand messaging, the tone. There needs to be an alignment on what are the attributes or what is our unique value prop? What do we want to be known for?
Mhm.
And to make sure that that is in the messaging so that again every touch point with a prospect is aligned with the attributes of our brand that we want them to know.
Yeah, I mean, so what are some of the things that you see go wrong if those things that you just mentioned aren't done? If they're not part of the equation?
Well, I think, going back to if your SDR or BDR is not trained or not working with marketing to get the right narrative. And actually, one thing to point out is that I have been hearing of more instances where the BDR, SDR team actually sits within marketing because they are more part of that upper funnel, mid funnel engagement versus, closing the deal on the end. But I think, I've seen them and I'm guilty of trying them. There's so many email
Mhm.
tricks. You see them, you get them that that are just trying to get someone's attention, getting them to respond, but you're not really demonstrating the value that you're providing. Or, you get the automated sequence. And the third one is like, oh, you're either not available, you're in a ditch, or you got eaten by an alligator, or D, yes, you want to contact me. And is that necessarily on brand? Like it depends if that's your brand humor, but like if those same best practices are used over and over again by all the companies and you're not creating that differentiation in that outreach, this is where it ties to your sales cycle and your close rate. If you're blasting 1,000 generic emails every week and your engagement rate is such a small percentage, like you're just continuing to spin your wheels versus a more customized, targeted outreach where
Yeah.
you're talking about the business challenges that you can solve for them.
Yeah. Wow. Very well said. That is something I hear in the market all the time because I think there's just a lot of misperceptions out there, right? So if you think about the channels themselves on the marketing side, most of the people who are in leadership roles and are in decision making roles hate a lot of the ways those tactics are executed and
Yeah.
they kind of hate being the victim of them, so to
Yeah.
speak, right? Like who loves getting 10 cold emails today from somebody they don't even know, talking
Right.
about something they don't even understand or have time for? Nobody likes getting
Nobody
that.
wants that. Yeah.
Right. But that isn't maybe necessarily the type of email program that you would be talking about to someone or that I would be talking about to someone. There are a lot more strategic and elevated ways to do that when you have that brand story well
Mhm.
constructed and it matches the level of quality of every other part of your company, right?
There's so many technologies to help you better customize your email. Like, did they attend an event? Then you speak about the event, or, did you meet them at an event, or did they download your white paper? Then you reach out. The goal really should be to build a relationship with them. LinkedIn had a stat they published last year that was B2B buyers are only in market 5% of the time. So
Yeah.
95% of the time, they're not in market. And so during that 95% of the time, that's your opportunity to make sure they've heard of you, make sure they like you in a favorable context in relation to, oh, you offer something, they can solve their problem. And then the third is you're there when they're in market. And so it's all customized to your solution that you're selling. But if you're selling a tech solution or an industrial solution that people only have one of at a time,
Yeah.
you're going to have to wait until their contract is over, most
Mhm.
likely, right? If what your product you're selling is something that people can adopt all the time and they might layer onto other services, that 5% of the time is actually broader, but they could love you today, but their contract with your competitor might be 10 more months and they either can't get out of it or there's other
Yeah.
financial implications. That's where you're building that relationship through those emails and other content engagement opportunities.
Yeah, and you've gotta have that coverage on the brand side
Right.
to build that
Yeah.
relationship, build trust,
Mhm.
build credibility, so that when you have more targeted campaigns that come out and you hit
Exactly.
them at
Mhm.
that right time, they're there.
Mhm.
I was just talking about this with someone the other day. It's like, as marketers and salespeople, we have a toolbox sitting behind us, and we have to
Yeah.
know when the right tool is needed for the job. And you may have to have more than one tool out at the same time to
Mhm.
ensure that whatever path you're crossing, you've got the match for that particular need, right? I think
Right.
people are
I love that
surprised to learn it
analogy.
doesn't
Yeah.
just have to be one thing. You can
Right.
have all these layers going on at one time
Mhm.
that helps get the attention of your audience.
Yeah, and it can't just be one thing because there's so many different touch points and personas within your target audience or buying behaviors or personality types. What resonates with somebody isn't going to necessarily resonate with their counterpart.
Yeah. So let's talk about sales cycles. I mean, everyone in the B2B space kind of groans over the length of a sales cycle, right? Like there are industrial manufacturers that could have 12, 18, 24-month sales cycles. 6 to
Mhm.
12 months is fairly common in an industrial
Yeah.
environment. So I would love to have you talk about ways to shorten those sales cycles.
The ideal scenario is by the time you have your first meeting set up, you've already done an amazing job with marketing and branding and communicating your value prop that the first sales call isn't a this is who we are. But
Mhm.
even if that's the case, what we've done in the past is prior to the first sales call, you need to invest time in really researching who you're going to be speaking with. So a couple of the kind of tactics that we've taken in the past is once the meeting is set up, you send an email out with these are the questions I'm going to look for you to answer so that I can better customize my proposal for you. And then it includes things about top competitors, budgets, like just trying to get a better understanding of what are their pain points. And the more you can get that information in advance, the better that you can prepare for the sales call. Another thing that we started putting into practice was asking if they required an NDA before talking to us about their business. The worst thing that can happen is you get on a call and you start asking them questions and they say, actually, I can't answer any of those until we're under NDA. So
Mhm.
ideally, you have the NDA set up, you've sent out the questionnaire, and you can say, if you want to send these to me in advance, great. Otherwise, please be prepared with that. And then also just doing your industry research and your competitive analysis. There's a lot of tools out there that can tell you, get a better idea of where they sit in regards to their competitive set. Remember, it's all relationship building. So make sure you're spending time on that initial call, not only getting the answers to your questions, but trying to build rapport with the buyer. And again, getting a better understanding, find out, are they the decision maker? Do they influence the decision maker? Are they talking to 10 people or are you already on a short list? Understanding if your solution fits their budget. I mean, that's important too. Talking about money at the beginning is always awkward, but you don't want to spend 4 weeks on engagement and proposals to find out that they never could afford you in the first place.
How often do you find that sales organizations within brands have that type of rigor developed? Is that something that your company can come in and help provide a
Mhm.
solution for?
I think because there's so much pressure on sales teams to go, 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 that there's not always a lot of time spent on that rigor, that level of research. The ideal scenario for me was always like, if they respond with the answers, you can actually have a proposal practically ready for them on that first call. I mean, either
Yeah.
way, you could say, oh, that's so interesting. This is some of the information I found. Does this align with what you're seeing? Like, just, the more you can get. But no, I found that a lot of the sales teams that I've worked with, they prefer to just get on and have that all on the first call. But then you have to schedule the next call to share your research.
Hmm.
And so that was one of the best practices that I'd put into place in my last agency and that I try to do for clients is when you get into this practice, you could almost eliminate a step to the sales process because now you're getting more in depth on that first call. And the other kind of sales best practice that I don't do well is set the next call before you hang up the call. Even if it's a week out and you realize like you're not ready or they're not ready, then you can change it. But at least having it on the calendar, they're not going to just disappear and not engage you with the next. So that's kind of the best practices for the very first call.
Yeah. And what you're talking about, there's some risk involved. And so let's say, for example, they're like, we're not really ready to set the next meeting. It's like, that's good news and bad news, right? Like,
Right.
the bad news is, well, I just invested X amount of time and you're not willing or ready to set the next one. But the good
Mm-hmm.
news is I can move on to numerous other things that I need to do because this doesn't
Yeah.
sound like that big of a priority for you to solve, right? And
Mm-hmm.
maybe I need to make this a lower priority, keep it in more of a nurture relationship
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
status, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a really, really good point. And that response also tees you up to ask more questions. And to your
Hmm.
point, say something like, totally understand, just so I have a better understanding of what your timeline is. Like, when were you looking to choose a new partner? Like, maybe they're like, to your point, I'm fact finding for an RFP I'm going to do in March. It happens. But then you ask, can we put a call on the calendar for February and see what they say? But you want to keep those touch points warm.
Yeah, I like that. That's like the never say die attitude of a true salesperson right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
You have to kind of go at the pace they're willing to
Mhm.
go at. You can't force someone to be ready for something. You can prompt and you can make those
Yeah,
nudges, but yeah, it's
yeah.
otherwise it does turn into icky and then the
Mhm.
trust erodes, right? Like they might not
Right.
have the same level of trust for you anymore.
I think
Um,
another point to Terry is harping on that you're building a relationship here. And you really need to, especially when there's such a long sales cycle that you're going to be talking over time and then there might be dinners involved. Like you're building this relationship and there needs to be a lot of trust there. One example, a Fortune 500 brand that we were pitching about a year ago is the woman on the phone. She just had her resources decrease. She knew she needed to hire somebody that did what we did. And she admittedly was like, I am in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. And so we took that opportunity to say, we are your partners. How can we help? Do you need more information? Like, do you want us to put together more of a 101 that you can share with your team? And just kind of demonstrating and kind of leaning into that help us help you, but what do you need? And reiterating that once we're engaged, we're going to be your partners. So let us help you now. And that I think ultimately really led to us winning the business because from the beginning we just leaned in and really provided the level of education and comfort that she needed in choosing a partner.
Yeah, yeah, that's an awesome story. Have you ever seen that Gartner image, The Long Hard Slog? That story made me think about it because, we all want to really think about our sales process in like four
Mhm.
steps, right?
Yeah.
And people move through them logically and sequentially, and like that doesn't happen ever.
Yeah.
The image, it's got all
Yeah.
this kind of chaos happening around it because you can move forward a step and then another stakeholder asks a question that takes you back a step. You might jump
Mhm.
forward a couple, move back one. That is continuously happening through all of
Mhm.
this relationship building. In my mind, that means several different things. One of them I'd like to ask you about is, how do you see CRM tools or systems really
Mhm.
supporting all of this? What's your viewpoint
Yeah.
on that?
I definitely think they're valuable. I use HubSpot myself. I don't quite utilize all of the bells and whistles and some of the add-in partners, but absolutely important for tracking, getting a better understanding of what is your actual average sales cycle. I went into a company that didn't have a marketing to sales infrastructure at all, and they had a very kind of rudimentary iteration of Salesforce. And with some Salesforce expert consultants helping me, we were able to identify that that sales cycle was 90 to 120 days. And then, so we had a benchmark that then we could improve upon, and we could look at where we're, and this is from like the sales side of HubSpot, but where were our engagements getting stuck, and how can we improve those? How many days between? So on that side, it gave us more like numerical goals that we could target and kind of work on. From the CRM email side of it, absolutely. I think going back to what we were talking about is that it gives you the ability to customize your outreach based on what you know about the customer. And I know there's so many different tools that are available and that can add on to your HubSpot or your Salesforce or other CRM. What do you know about your buyer? Where was their last touch point? And really customizing that outreach to make it feel personal, because again, you're developing a relationship.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you can use these tools to help you save a lot of busy work time so that you
Definitely,
can
definitely.
focus more on making all of the connections as
Mhm.
personable as possible, because that just shows the genuine nature of your brand, the way that you're trying to connect and
Mhm.
solve for problems. I think
Yeah,
the tools help support
definitely.
that. Yeah.
Well, and the automation, to your point, saves so much time, right? So you can say, like, to your point, the example of the person who said, not today, not scheduling another call, you maybe have a special email sequence for that. You send them just a note every week and a half or so, just saying, checking in. That can all be automated. But if they respond or if they open it, then the next email is something more customized based on the fact that they opened it. If they just never open your email again, at least you're staying top of mind, because even you never know, 6 months down the road, they might be like, oh, who was that person I talked to? Let me
Yeah.
see. Or, oh, I got to get back to that girl, Kerry. She kept calling.
Right. Yeah. And that engagement helps. Like, I think if
Yeah.
somebody ever indicates to you, like, well, first of all, if they tell you stop sending them, you stop
Mhm,
sending them,
mhm.
right? Or if
Yep.
they're giving you the cold shoulder a little bit, then you can always pull back on the frequency.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that you're saying, like one of the big insights that I would love for the listeners of this podcast to hear is you develop a rigor in a system and a set of metrics that you're using to benchmark every other part of your business.
Right.
Bring that mindset to your sales and marketing
Right.
operations, because
Mhm.
you can develop benchmarks and go make sure that your sales reps, your marketing folks, and everybody who's involved in that process are learning from the
Mhm.
numbers and the metrics, right? Like you wouldn't not run a financial statement every
Right.
month.
Right.
You wouldn't
Right.
fail to have the person running operations and running the night shift of your welding team not look at how many different welds a person can do per day, right? Like you're
Right.
going to
Right.
look at all that and how many mistakes are made and how many redos you've got to do on a piece of equipment. Do that in your sales and marketing area and hold
Mhm.
those people accountable so that you have something to build on from a benchmark.
Right. And it gives you
Yeah.
more visibility into, is it a training challenge or is it a bandwidth and resource challenge? Like maybe you're seeing your sales team slow down in how quickly they're booking that second meeting because they're too busy with all their meetings. Maybe that's an indication that it's time to add another salesperson. It
Yeah.
gives you a lot of data and insight, especially then if you can categorize it by specific type of company, industry. It might give you a better idea of who your ICP really is versus who you think it is. There's so much data and insights that can come out of having that tracking and that process. And I know there's also so much automation and AI available now that the sales reps don't even have to write lengthy notes anymore. It can record the call and drop it right in. So much time can be saved too.
And I think the positive to that is, again, find ways to use AI that saves
Mhm.
those repetitive, mindless tasks from having to be done by a person. Don't
Yeah.
have it replace actual building of relationships.
Right.
Like that's where
Good
you
point.
want
Yeah.
the salespeople to spend their time and make
Mhm.
sure these AI tools are used to fill in the gaps and make not only time savings on mindless repetitive tasks, but also predictive
Mhm.
pieces of information. I can't get
Yeah.
over when I record a meeting now, you get an immediate summary from
Yeah.
these tools and it tells you the high points. Who
Mhm.
doesn't have a vice president of sales with 3 reps in that region working for them that wouldn't love to just see that recap, right? Like I immediately know
Right.
what happened on the call, me that report, right?
Right. That's a really good point too. I remember iterations of my boss asking me questions about a certain deal, and I didn't have to then go ask the sales rep. I could go into HubSpot and say, well, actually, they spoke to them today and the next call is tomorrow, without having to keep that all in my brain or spend time getting that all for myself. So many, to your point, really valuable insights.
So we talked about the sales cycle, and I think you touched on close rates a little bit,
Mhm.
but I
Mhm.
think you may want to elaborate that on a little bit more. Like, what are some things
Yep.
companies can do to improve close rates also?
So, some of the biggest factors are trust, right? So, that needs to be, again, part of the branding strategy, the initial communication and contact, but really demonstrating that you have the experience to solve their business challenge. So, this is where you really need to spend time interviewing your account management team or your customer success team, or if your business is one that has call centers, find out what are a lot of the pain points that people are calling about, so that you then can understand how are we solving those.
Hmm.
So then you can say, I hear your business challenge of, XYZ. We've actually have experience with that specifically. We had this client that had a similar challenge. These are the steps that we took to fix that or improve that. This is how we used our area of expertise to solve those business challenges. And so I'm proving to you that we've done this, and we can, in the ideal scenarios that you can say, and, happy to have you speak to them as a reference. That's another point that I'll go back to, but I think it's really, the more you can demonstrate a specific, very customized solution. And you might not have, you're selling men's boots and we've sold men's boots, but you might have an example where they didn't have the right infrastructure and you were able to help a company with infrastructure. So, it's really understanding not just, oh, we have another client that had that same product that they sold. It's understanding again what the business challenge and how we're able to solve it
Yeah.
with our arsenal. Some of the first sales trainings that I took back in my early youth, we actually did Toastmasters trainings
Oh,
and storytelling training. They saw as what we needed, the strengths that we needed to persuade our buyers that we were the right choice. So it's important to remember that and to have that arsenal of examples. And that's, again, something that you can do in that research. Take the time to research and get those examples from
yeah.
your team.
Yeah. You've got to know as a salesperson what your company is capable of solving for.
Right,
And you've got
right.
to have that
Mhm.
background. You've got to take some time to do that internal training and research. But then you
Mhm.
also have to take that same time and do that same type of research to better qualify who you're talking
Yep.
to. So you can improve your close rate by doing a better job of doing your homework.
Yeah, and really
Yeah.
customizing,
Yeah.
showing examples of pain points and talking through how you would solve it. Help them get the feeling of what it would be like to be working with your company. And ideally, you have the case studies and numerical stats as well.
Is there a particular framework or methodology that you've developed or follow that is part of your engagement?
Yes. So a
Okay.
lot of kind of the examples that we talked through today, but the first things I do are to really find out, again, like, what are your business challenges, getting a better understanding of, okay, you say you need revenue growth, which is what I'm good at, but what do you have in place? What have you tried? I recently had a conversation with a brand who said we have some junior level salespeople and they need training. So that's something that I can come in and do. Other clients need that fractional CGO person to come in and build that brand story. So it's all the way through to closing the deal. So really, I get a better understanding through those discovery calls of what the business challenge is, and then customize what the scope of work is exactly to what the client's challenges are. The framework is the audit and the competitive analysis to get the better understanding, making sure they have an ICP. If they don't have an ICP, that's where we start. If they do, great, then we start elsewhere. But it's always customized. The end goal is that I leave them with a process and an infrastructure where they can continue to scale revenue growth at the end of my engagement. If I'm successful, you don't need me anymore because I've built you up for your success.
Yeah. Well, and I think brands love hearing that from a consultant, right? Because the traditional way people think about a consultant is you're always trying to sell me the next thing that I'm going to need. And so you're very focused on creating connection between the business goals, the strategy, and what activities the sales and marketers are working on, right? On their team.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think it's important to point out that we always are parallel pathing as well. So I might come in and see, again, like you don't have an ICP, you don't have like a clear differentiator. That's going to take months. You need to grow revenue now. So then I'll also look at, auditing that sales pipeline process and saying, what are things that we can improve upon now? Let's shorten the sales cycle while we work on identifying your ICP and how we're going to fill that pipeline.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I do think that's important too, because if a company has revenue growth challenges, hopefully there is like an expectation that those aren't just, you can't just quickly turn that around if you're trying to really change their mindset, change the strategy, but still being in that parallel path and kind of thinking about quick wins, I think is really helpful because there likely would typically be some sitting there, right?
Yeah, there always are some more near-term improvements that can be made to improve sales rate, the close rate, and shorten the sales cycle out of the gates. And then it's like, let's go through the pipeline as quick as possible while we work on those longer-term initiatives to fill the pipeline. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I love it. Are there any other points that you want to make sure that we cover?
Two last points to share. McKinsey did research a year ago that showed that brands that have marketing at the core of their growth strategy outperform their competition. And so that just reiterates the importance of having that investment to build awareness and differentiate yourself so that you can drive demand and sales. And then the other key part of that is to break down the silos between your marketing and sales infrastructure so that there is clear communication, feedback for improving all of those stages and steps. Sales shouldn't be creating a sales deck or pitch deck that marketing hasn't been part of to make sure that aligns with what they're saying out in the marketplace. So it's that integration, the importance of marketing as part of your growth and revenue strategy, but also the integration between marketing and sales.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Okay, I have some fun questions because this just helps me get to know my guests better as well. Let me start with the first one. What is the best vacation you've ever been on?
Oh my gosh. Vacation? We went to Portugal last year, and I think that was one of my most amazing places that I've ever been. I think the people, just the wine, everything there is so beautiful. So definitely top of my list, places that I want to go back to.
Okay. All right. That's making it onto my list now too. Yeah, definitely. I hear like Spain and Italy a lot, but Portugal, that's interesting.
I love Italy as well, and beautiful, but it's crowded. And I'm gonna get in trouble here, but like the people in Portugal are so much nicer and friendlier to Americans than the Italians are. So
okay. All right. We're gonna check out Portugal then. Hopefully you are a music fan, even if you're a light music fan, but if you could see any band or artist, dead or alive, that you're like, oh, I wish I would have seen this group or this person, who would that be?
I think I've got a daughter and she would kill me if I didn't say Taylor Swift. So
Okay. She's like, thank you,
Yeah.
mom. I see that in my future now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you find yourself recommending a book, like a favorite personal or business book that you just find yourself, kind of recommending over and over?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually read a lot. I think it so much depends on the genre, but one that I keep coming back to is Devil in the White City. It is historical fiction, murder mystery. It's Eric Larson, and it's also the World's Fair in Chicago. So it also shares a lot about some of the things that were invented or presented for the first time at the World's Fair, like popcorn, with a little murder mystery parallel pathing through. So definitely recommend that as a great book.
Wow. Yeah. You hit like a lot of hot buttons. If you had said something about chocolate and coffee also in there, I would be like buying it now. That
That
sounds like a real,
might have been there too. I just
yeah,
remember popcorn.
that sounds like a good book. And then my last question is, what's your favorite job that you've ever had?
So earlier I mentioned I was a strategist for a while, and that was one of my favorites. I'd say so junior level, that was my favorite because every day it was a different vertical or business challenge. Like one day it's a healthcare company, the next day was a CPG, the next day it was consumer electronics. And it was like really diving into what's the challenge that we're going to need to solve.
Hmm.
Loved that. But I would say my best job as a leader, I had the most amazing team at Catalyst, which is part of Group M. And we called ourselves the Pirate Ship in Boston. We built out an extraordinary agency, or rebuilt an extraordinary agency over a 4-year period, that's still continuing to grow. And we just had this energy of this team that was always paddling towards the same North Star. And we talk about it today. We worked so hard, but we were all in it together, and the team chemistry and just everything was amazing. Someday, I hope that RBMA is big enough to have a team like that, and I can
Yeah.
hire all those colleagues back. We helped so many brands by taking them on as our clients, and evolved with the rapid e-commerce space, and just worked hard but had a blast.
Yeah. That sounds like a great mix. I mean, because you were part of a culture and helped to
Mhm.
develop a culture that was like that, it sounds like you have a really good vision in mind for your company now.
And that
Or,
was my
yeah.
first go at really marketing and sales together. And I think to me, it's like, why would you ever have it in silos after that experience?
Oh, okay. That's pretty insightful too. Yeah. Well, I agree. I mean, I think that's just all blending together. It's
Mhm.
unavoidable. And if you don't create a structure and a mindset and accountability systems now that like embrace that, competitors are going to pass you up.
They
Right.
are. They are. They're going to do
Yeah.
it better. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being our guest today. I really
Yeah.
appreciate you
Thank you,
spending the time.
Terry.
I've enjoyed getting to know you better. If somebody is interested in getting in touch with you, what's the best step for them to take?
Yeah, two things. One is revenuebasedmarketing.com is my consultancy. And of course, that is to remind everyone that good marketing is tied to good revenue growth. And then I also have a podcast. You can search on any podcast directory or YouTube for Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. We are launching episode 24 tomorrow and just hit 1,000 downloads since launching in July. So
That's awesome.
it covers all topics of marketing strategy related to revenue growth. So
Congratulations. I mean, I think everybody should search that out and look for my episode, of course. So that'll be,
thank you. Yes, of
yeah.
course. We'll have to make a special announcement when it goes live.
Yeah, no, that would be fun. So thanks and
Terry.
have a good rest of your day, Carrie.
Thank you. You too. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to B2B Marketing Methods. Please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast channel and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you and connect. You can find me on LinkedIn or visit our company website at marketingrefresh.com.